Unidos. Nos va a hablar acerca de Building the Transformation Company, conferencia vinculada a nuestro track de estrategia y gestión organizacional. Christian es el cofundador y CEO de Engage Innovate. Es consultor en estrategia, innovación, transformación y desarrollo de ecosistemas y superclusters de innovación. Trabaja con juntas directivas, CEOs y equipos ejecutivos alrededor del mundo en cómo enfrentar la disrupción, diseñar nuevos modelos de negocio y desarrollar con éxito programas de transformación estratégica. Es autor, conferencista y miembro de la Facultad de Negocios de diferentes universidades europeas. Christian cuenta con estudios superiores de la Universidad de Berlin, de la Universidad de Mónaco también, así como un MBA de Copenhagen Business School, con énfasis en gerenciamiento, estrategia y emprendedurismo. Good morning, welcome to Conecta B2B Live. We thank everyone for being here. The next talk will be in charge of Christian Rajan. He is going to tell us about building the Transformation Company, conference linked to our strategy and management track organizational. Christian is the co-founder and CEO of Engage Innovate. He is a consultant in strategy, innovation, transformation, and development of ecosystems and innovation superclusters. Work with board of directors, CEOs, and executive teams around the world. He is an author and a member of the business faculty of different universities of Europe. So, are you ready, Christian?
Absolutely, Mariela, and thank you very much for the invitation.
You're welcome. I leave you with him.
Thank you. And let's just check. You can now see my presentation, Building Transformational Company, correct?
Correct.
Fantastic. So thank you. Thank you, everyone. This is such a pleasure. So I will share some stories and insights around how to build a transformational company, and these stories and insights will be based on work that we have done in Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia, and partially also in the Americas. Now I'm very, very happy to be with you in Costa Rica today, and I really just wish I could be there in person. You know, this is one of the few countries in that region where I haven't had a chance to visit yet. So I hope that soon I'll get a chance to come and join you in person. But when I'm not in Costa Rica, I can also be here. So this is sort of my neighborhood and what we would normally do this time of year. So even with lockdown and travels, it's not so bad. It's not so bad. But I want to talk to you more about the business side. And this is what I normally do. I work with companies. I work with executives. I work with CEOs. I work with boards of directors to help them transform, innovate, and grow for the future. And I hope that some of the stories that I will share and maybe some of the research that I will share can be helpful for you in different ways. And this is typically what I do for work. Large group, I work with the management team, I work with the strategy team, I work with very large group. Right here, we are in Spain, 350 people, and we're working on what's called a 1 billion strategy. And this is a company, it's a global pharmaceutical company, and they're trying to transform their business model so they can reach a $1 billion sales in revenue. I do a lot of work with large industrial companies. For example, we work with train companies on questions like, how do we transform into more of a mobility company? You know, if you're using it and if you're operating a train company, should you care about autonomous buses? Should you care about autonomous cars? Should you care about self-driving mobility? Or should we only care about the trains? And that's a big question. And that is a strategic question about the future of your business. I do a lot of work with global energy companies. Here we have a utility company in Asia, about 40,000 employees, and we're working on the transformational program, and we're working through different business ideas, different business models, and different go-to-market strategies. And a lot of this work is really about transformation, transforming your mindset, transforming your strategy, transforming the company, and of course, transforming what the future of this company will look like. I've also done a lot of work with companies in aviation, in mobility, and in helicopters. And for example, with some of the helicopter companies, we work on what does a very transformed business model look like, moving from helicopters to drones. So these are questions that we're exploring with customers all over the world. What does the future of our company look like? How should we understand new technologies and industry shifts? How can we come up with new transformational strategies? And some of these questions are quite complex. Some of these questions are quite difficult. And I'm sure that many of you also have questions similar, but in other industries than I'm showing. Right now, of course, we are working a lot on the digital side. So all of our programs, all of our work, and all of our advisory services is also available online. So we work with companies in Asia, in the UK, across Europe, to help them develop future fit strategies in a digital world. And this has been really, really interesting. So that's my introduction. I wanna talk to you about something that we've been recently working on called building the transformational company. And this has roots back almost 20 years. It has roots in research almost 10 years. And it has been a big project for us for the last 18 months or 1.5 years. And I will be sharing these slides. I'll be sharing some insights. I'll be sharing some stories. We have time for Q&A afterwards. But you can also meet two of my colleagues, Roberto Chaveri and Carlos Gallegos, that are both speaking at this wonderful event. And they are both located in Costa Rica, and they're probably a little bit easier to connect and collaborate and discuss with. So if you think that my presentation can have some value and be interesting to you, then of course you can also speak with my good friends and partners, Roberto and Carlos, and they'll both be speaking on March 12 and also on May 12 and May 13. So let's talk about this building the transformational company, a CEO handbook. Yeah. So we just wrote this and published the report. This is about 90 pages. It's very easy to get. It's very easy to read. It's easy for executives and decision makers to start thinking about and reflecting what should we do about the future of our company. And you can download this online, of course. But I'll take you through some of these stories. And I want to start with this story. So what you're seeing here is the share price of two large companies in the energy space. So we have ExxonMobil, American, in orange, and we have Equinor, the Norwegian energy company, in blue. And you can see how they're trending from 2010 to 2020. So there are some ups and downs, but largely they follow the same trend lines. Largely, they are quite similar. Now, you could say that based on this, right now, Equinor is a little bit better investment. Or you could say back in 2016, ExxonMobil was a much better investment. But it's largely the same. Now, this is more interesting. Now, it's the same timeline. So it's 10 years, ExxonMobil, Equinor, 10 years. And now you see something else. Now you see a different company. And now you see Exxon being down, Equinor being stable, and then this Danish company called Oersted, formerly known as Dong Energy, is up about 215%. This, my friends, is what transformation really looks like. Transformation is not up or down 5%. It's not tweaking a little bit. Transformation is deep structural change, not just to the revenue and not just to the business model, but to the entire value creation logic of the company. So when we take a 3 years, a much shorter timeline, so a 3-year horizon, we can just zoom in and see this much more clearly, where ExxonMobil down 36%, Equinor around 0%, and then Oersted is up 200%. This, again, my friends, is what transformation looks like. So the question is, what can other companies learn from this? And what I do, working with colleagues like Roberto and Carlos, is that we study and we seek to understand, we extract the principles, and then we build tools, solutions, programs, projects for other companies around the world so they can learn from the same stories and successes. And Oersted is a wonderful example, not of a clean energy transformation, but of a business transformation. Not of a digital transformation, but a business transformation. And you can see here on all factors from 2006 to 2012, so that's about 12 years time, they have fundamentally transformed their CapEx strategy. They've transformed their revenue, and they transformed their national versus international strategy. Today, Oersted is a green international energy company. And it's really interesting when we look at the CEO who says, we have gone through an accelerated transformation, but it took them 10 years. It took them 10 years. We have gone through an accelerated transformation, yet it took them 10 years to achieve this. Transformation, we find, is very challenging, very difficult, and it takes between 7 to 12 years, typically around 10 years, to get a successful transformation. And the paradox, once you've done one successful transformation, you actually just repeat and start over because you have to go again. So in our work that I'd like to share more with you, we really try to structure and codify some of these best practices and really help companies across different industries to understand how can they transform more than just business as usual. And it's fascinating looking at Oersted because they're now in a fundamentally different position where the world is looking at them, where financial analysts are looking at them, where regulators and governments and customers and partners are looking at them and saying, can they actually become, from the small country of Denmark, the world's first green energy super major, meaning it will be one of the biggest energy companies in the world. So this is what transformation looks like. And as we take you through the presentation today, I'll be sharing some of these tools and the techniques and the tips. And of course, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, we can discuss that afterwards. And if you're wondering, of course, the presentation will be made available. So let's take a look at this definition. What is transformation? And as you dig into the literature and the books behind me, you'll find many definitions and many different understandings. A lot of people will say it's digital transformation, and that could be true. Others will say it's more of a financial transformation, also could be true, or business model transformation. But we find it's something more than that. It's something higher, what we call the business or the strategic transformation. So we define transformation as a significant, lasting, and non-reversible change to the company's value creation logic. So how this company creates value. It has to be significant. It has to be lasting in time. And it has to be non-reversible. So you can't change it back next week or next month or next year. Now, with that definition, a large number of the transformation or digital transformation projects that we see, they don't meet them. And I think it's really important for CEOs, for board of directors, for top management teams to really understand what is transformation, what does it mean for us, and how do we make it successful. So we also find in the research, in the report we published, three very popular things that transformation is not. It is not an HR-led change management, like we need to change our culture. Now that is a small part of the big transformation, but it's not enough by itself. Second, it is not a digital semi-transformation, meaning you implement a new system or you create workplace or you have a new SAP in place. And it's definitely not investing in innovation, creating a new hackathon, creating a new lab. These things are completely insufficient for real business transformation. One of the keys that we find, and this is really for the C-suite and the top management, one of the keys we find is that you can actually recognize a transformation pattern. And in that transformation pattern, you can sort of see over a 7, maybe 10-year time period that a growing number of the revenue and a growing number of the profits are actually coming from new business areas. So what this means is when you have 25 to 30% of the total revenue coming from your new business areas, very often outside your old core business, you can start recognizing a transformation pattern where, hey, something's happening. Most of our revenue climbing up could actually be coming from these new areas. And these new areas where we have core business, growth business, and explore business, you actually realize that this core is not as important anymore. Your growth areas and your explore areas are now quickly on the rise. And by the time you sort of realize this, financial analysts, partners, suppliers, customers, media, business media, they have already realized that something is changing and something is shifting, and this only accelerates this process. Very often, when companies have gone through a successful transformation, they often say, well, we didn't really understand what we were doing. We didn't plan this. It happened organically in a multi-year process. But when we go back and we study it, you can actually find this pattern. 25, 30% revenue comes from new business areas. These new business areas can be found in growth and explore. They have higher margins. They're more attractive business areas. And then finally, financial analysts, business media, the business press, they realize it. And the company is now well underway, successfully transformed. And I think this is important to understand because in our research, we find that pretty much every industry, even pre-COVID-19, were in some sort of way facing transformation. Banks, banking, finance, massive industry shifts, so much happening driven by technology that every single bank, every single banking institution, every single financial institution in the world needs to transform. Some have, some are, many haven't. Energy companies. Every single energy company from oil and gas, from utility, and outwards needs to start transforming because they're going to be stuck with outdated infrastructure. They're going to be stuck with outdated technology platforms. They're going to be stuck with outdated investments. And energy companies that aren't already doing this is already way behind the curve. Telcos, and I've been doing some work in the telco sector, and there's a lot of challenges right there. Some really, really big key strategic questions. Because telcos are now almost pushed to invest into 5G, while at the same time, some of these pure play software companies are coming over the top to take enough of their revenue, their profit pockets. It's very, very difficult for a telco to continue business as usual. Automotive. And it's not just a shift from fossil to renewable. It's so much more than that. Industrial conglomerates, digitization of supply chain, home shoring. There are going to be so many factors shaping these industries and many, many others. In fact, there's a really good study by Accenture that says out of 10,000 companies, 71% are either in the middle of or in the beginning of a significant disruption period, which will force them to try to transform or go bankrupt. And these are the things that we work with. And these are the things that we try to study and make sense of, and actually work with companies to build what we call internal transformational capacity so they can navigate this landscape themselves. So to do this, we've developed a couple of frameworks that I would like to share with you. And the first framework is what we call the 3 types of transformation. Because in our research, we find that there are 3 very different types of transformation: shock, shift, and evolution. And it's absolutely critical that we understand which of these is us and what do we need to do as a consequence. So let's take a look at the first one, shock. This is Nokia. How did we get to this point? Why did we fall behind when the world around us was evolving? This is what I have been trying to understand. I believe at least some of it has been due to our attitude inside Nokia. I believe we have lacked accountability and leadership to align and direct the company through these disruptive times. Nokia, our platform is burning. These are the exact words of the last CEO, Stephen Elop, the Canadian that came from Microsoft to Nokia with the goal to transform the company and couldn't pull it off in time. Because he probably felt that they were doing a evolution. Remember, so we had 10 years, while in reality, Nokia was in a shock. So they had very limited time and a very, very urgent need to transform. So the first is the shock. And the shock is very, very, very difficult. The second example, the second type of transformation is this idea of shift. And shift is a sudden strategic move where the company decides this direction is no longer valid. We need to go this direction, and then just changes almost overnight. And a good example of that is Adobe. And Adobe is one of those companies that have really quickly transformed from one value creation logic to another. And what they get a lot of credit for is the speed, the tempo, the pace, and the execution powers that they've had to make this happen. And the way that Adobe worked with the financial community, the way that Adobe worked with their investors, the way that Adobe worked with Wall Street to actually create the story, to guide the community through this transformation is just marvelous. And it is interesting when you study management at Adobe, because they will tell you that companies that simply stick to what has made them successful in the past leave themselves open to disruption, which of course creates the need for transformation. So we have shock, very difficult, very challenging, very hard to pull off. We have shift, which is a really bold leadership move, quick decisions, strong execution. And we have evolution. Evolution is a very long-term, well-planned, really well-organized, where the company is following this core growth and explore playbook pretty much every time. And there is this idea that Professor Rita McGrath calls continuous reconfiguration. Slowly investing in new areas while divesting from the old areas. And a great example is Microsoft. And it's important here that what happened at Microsoft and what happens at many of these evolutionary transformation is both a people and culture and a business and strategy transformation. And the outcome, of course, is that the new CEO of Microsoft, he has actually added $850 billion to Microsoft's market cap. And that's the outcome that we would hope to see from a successful transformation. So you can here see ExxonMobil, which we saw earlier on a 10-year timeline. So if you chose to invest in the energy sector and you chose to invest in ExxonMobil, you would be on the green line. Or if you chose to invest in Microsoft's transformation, this is what you would have gotten. Investing in energy or investing in technology transformation. So those three types, the shock, shift, and evolution, we find is one of the key pillars in understanding how to successfully navigate transformation in practice. Shock, very often the company works with their blindfolds on, ignore weak signals, they don't pay attention to what's happening around them. Shift, very often there's a strategy review, bold leadership, willingness to burn the lifeboats so you can't go back. It's not possible. You close down the old businesses. While evolution is a long-term process with a lot of conflicts, a lot of dilemmas, a lot of challenges that needs to be solved along the way. Now, I would love to discuss which one of these is more applicable for your firm. Which industry are you in? Which stage of disruption and which stage of transformation are you in? But you can read more about this in the report, and I'll share with you a few other things that maybe could be helpful for the work that you could do here. So the first is this idea of these 10 principles of transformation. And we're going to spend a little bit of time on that. Because as we've been digging in and really trying to understand what is transformation, how can companies transform, and what do we have to do to make this successful, we developed the 10 principles of transformation. And these 10 principles is basically the foundation, it's the guidebook, it's the playbook for companies like yourself that may be in a position where you want to transform. And I'll show you in a second how this connects in to a bigger roadmap and a bigger architecture. The first principle is you need to understand what is happening around you. This is what we call understand your industry shifts. So you need to understand how is our industry changing, what is happening around us, and what do we do about it. Second, master new ecosystems. So we have to work with new, not markets, but ecosystems where partners and suppliers and collaborators, new investors, new customer segments come together to shape entirely new value creation systems. For example, for Costa Rica, it would be very interesting to see what you could do around a ecosystem around digital health, around a digital ecosystem for really building world-class aquaculture industry and seafood industries. It would be interesting to see what you could do about subsea robotics as an ecosystem in Costa Rica. It would be interesting to see what you could do around digital tourism, building on your capabilities within tourism and travel, and then add digital technologies on top of that. These are examples, not of technologies, but of ecosystem development, where you need a lot of different people with a lot of different skills coming together to make this happen. Number 3, you want to build your core growth and explore framework. You want to make sure that you fully understand, and your board and your management team fully understand what is your core business, what is our growth business, and what is our explore business. Next, we got to develop what we call the transformation architecture. So getting your organizational structure, getting your legal framework, getting your financial frameworks to play. So these things come into play at the same time. Next, you have your innovation strategy. And you have to develop a fully fledged 5-step innovation strategy with your build, buy, partner, co-invest, and co-develop. Sixth, This is really important, and it's a big step for you guys in Costa Rica to fully realize and fully understand what this means in practice. Here we have learning to build business model portfolios. And a company like yours in Costa Rica today would probably have 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 business models. But to build this out fully, you should have 10, 15, 20 at least. Understanding which business models to build out, which business models to put on hold, which business models to close down. That's a big part of the leadership challenge in the transformation. Step number 7, mastering corporate venturing. Here, we have to figure out what are the startups we're investing in? What are the startups we're not investing in? What are the scale-ups? Which companies in Costa Rica could be acquired or invested? Which companies in Latin America? Which companies in Europe could be brought into the Costa Rican ecosystem so you could build this out with your local markets and your local customers? Principle number 8, build entirely new strategic capabilities, upgrading your technology platforms, upgrading your people platforms. Number 9, investments. And then finally, number 10, repeat. Now, these 10 principles is a playbook that you can apply. And you'll find this in much, much more detail in the report for building a transformational company. So we build on that, and we think about what could this mean for you guys in Costa Rica. You're now reading this, you're looking at the 10 principles, you're looking at some of these early ideas and say, okay, well, what could we do? What should we be doing? So one of the things you're going to find is a very applicable, very hands-on transformation roadmap. So you can actually today go online, strategytools.io, and you can find this transformation roadmap in our programs. And once you get your hands on it, you can work with your team, or you can work with our friends like Roberto and Carlos in Costa Rica to really make sense of this in terms of the local context, local market, and local customers. Here we have 3 stages. We have phase number 1, phase number 2, and phase number 3. Phase number 1, understanding the landscape. Now you probably recognize, understand your industry shifts, master new ecosystems, and build out your core growth and explore frameworks. So here you can see how we can deep dive in. You can really apply this to your management team to make sense of that first phase, understanding the landscape. Phase number 2, designing the journey. Here we look at the transformation architecture, we look at your innovation strategy, we look at your business model portfolio, and we look at your corporate venturing. And again, you can deep dive into those with your team or with the local partners. And finally, with phase 3, building the operation. Here we have aligning, here we have HR, and here we have small teams and units in entirely new areas. Finally, we have investments and then repetition. So this transformation roadmap with phase number 1, phase number 2, and phase number 3 is something you can actually work through in a large-scale transformation process. And you'll find a lot more about this in the report and the work we do below. So to wrap up with a few conclusions, and we'll have plenty of time for some Q&As, and I'll be happy to take any questions or any comments you may have. So some of the conclusion that we have from the work we've been doing and some of the research we've been doing here is, first of all, transformation is absolutely becoming the new normal. The traditional view of strategy as business as usual just doesn't hold up. Very few companies and very few industries can actually sustain a traditional business as usual strategy over time. Second, for companies that I work with all over the world, we're now realizing that we need to rethink and relearn how we build companies globally. There's a lot of things going on right now in terms of the resource allocation process, in terms of the reskilling, in terms of training thousands of people in how to think and how to act and how to work on transformation. And one of the key points that we find is that transformation is absolute the 21st century's number 1 leadership challenge. Because if you continue running a company based on your old value creation model and your old strategy, it is only a question. before you're out of business. So this idea that transformation is now a necessity is seeping in to companies and governments and ecosystems around the world. But it's not an easy task. It's not an easy task. First of all, from all the work that we've done with energy companies and aviation companies, technology companies, it's not an easy journey. So successfully navigating a transformation process could take up to 10 years. So we talk about 7 to 12 years, 10 years. And along the way, new strategy maps need to be created. That means that you need to build capabilities inside the company, start using new tools and new ways of working so that you can come up with new landscapes and new maps for your company. And then finally, the third one, at the deepest principle, we have to actually rethink what is strategy, what does strategy mean for our company, and how do we actually do the process of strategy. And this is what we call building the strategy journey. And it's a very different approach, it's a very different methodology to how we actually do strategy. So these 3 points, in sort of the almost the wrapping up conclusions, it's not an easy journey. New maps need to be created, and we do require a fundamental rethink of what is strategy and how do we work on strategy in practice. One of the good collaborators we have, faculty at Berkeley, Rick Rasmussen, when we work on this, he says, transformation is a journey that is measured in years. You do it right, and your company survive. If you fail, you may not be around. Transformation is a global challenge. We have the tools, we have the frameworks, and we now work with companies to help them learn how to make that happen. So in terms of your actions, because listening to me is probably not what you came for, I want to leave you with a few actionable points that you can get started on today. Because I think the value here lies in what you do, not in what you hear. So first of all, you can actually go online and you can download the report and you can read some of the material and you can get your hands on some of the tools. So go to strategytools.io or engageinnovate.com and building the transformational company, and you can find more about this information. And you can find this in English and different languages. Second, if you would be interested, we do have a complete online program. So this is a complete online program. It lasts 5 weeks. It has a combination of self-modules, so you go through at your own pace, and live workshops online. And you actually work with a global group of participants from different sectors, all learning how to work on transformation in a pure digital format. The next program that we run starts on May 25th. We also, of course, have custom programs. Or you could, which is most likely the best and the most high impact way, is to work with our local team in Latin America, where Roberto and Carlos run something we call the Building Transformational Company Consortium that brings together different companies with the combination of both the online and the offline. And for a really deep investment and for a really deep thinking process, this is by far the most impactful program you can do. This combines the best of many worlds. So to conclude, transformation is so much more than digital transformation. Transformation requires us to rethink what is strategy, how do we do strategy, and when we work with companies around the world, we realize that this is a big gap, it's a big step, and it's a big challenge. But I also hope that with some new tools and some new examples and some new insights, you can be better equipped to work on transformation in your case. So my name is Chris, and I will be happy to refer to Roberto or Carlos that will be speaking on May 12 and May 13. Ecosystems and strategic dilemmas. And these are key building blocks that you'll find within our work on building the transformational company. And I hope that this can help you build your transformational company. So on that note, I would be more than happy to take any questions, to take any comments, and I can have a discussion on this topic if I can be of any help to you.
Thank you. We have a few questions. The first one is from Daniel Gonzalez, and the question is, if the 10 principles of transformation apply for small, medium, and big companies?
So that's a good and timely question. So they are designed for big companies. So usually large companies, many of them, but not necessarily always publicly listed companies. But when we have seen in practice is that they can also be applied for smaller companies and SMBs. They're not relevant for startups. Startups would do other things, but for medium and small companies, they can also be applied, yes.
Then we have another question. How do you start a transformation program in the context of COVID-19?
Also a very, very timely question. Well, I think the first question there should be, do you need to? Now we have a different offering and a different service that we call corporate survivability in the age of COVID-19, and we work with governments and companies to get that up and running. So some companies realize that right now we just need to survive, and that's what they should focus on. Some companies realize that now is a really good time to start a transformation, and that's really the ideal outcome. Now, what we have seen is that some companies are there in that shock stage that I mentioned earlier, and that makes it quite challenging and quite difficult. But I think in the age and in the context of COVID-19, if you think that the future of your company requires a big change, then there's a good time to do so right now.
Okay, then we have the next question. How can established companies learn more about ecosystems?
So this is a really good question. So in the report we have a little bit about ecosystems, but I think a lot of companies today, they need to learn more about ecosystems, and they can study it online. They can work with people like Roberto and Carlos. They can look at some of the tools and some of the methodologies that we introduced in the report. There's some really wonderful research coming out of London Business School. There's some really good executive programs coming out of different business schools. But I think we need to learn as a whole how to start asking questions about ecosystems. It's a very new field, and it's going to require a lot of work.
Okay, and then we have the last question. In your experience, what is the most challenging principle for companies?
So the most that's a very good question. I think there are two questions. Well, there are two principles that are very challenging. The first one is actually the first one, understanding your industry shifts, because most companies are very busy running their business on a day-to-day basis. So they don't always have time to think about what's happening outside the company and what's happening maybe 1 year and 3 years and 5 years and 10 years out. So maybe the most challenging is number one, understand your industry shifts. And then the second is actually this number 9, where it says invest more. So actually going through the investment cycle, that is also a very, very challenging. So number 1 and number 9.
Since we have time, we have another question. What is the main hurdle companies face to start a transformational process?
Well, the biggest hurdle they face is probably not knowing or not having answered the why. Why should we? ¿Por qué necesito? Why should we transform? And I see a big difference in the companies that have asked and answered, and the ones that haven't asked. You should transform.
Okay, and we have a question from Javier Martinez, and he is asking, from your perspective, what is coming for Latin America in the process of transformation, knowing that the actual situation?
Could you repeat that? I just want to make sure I understand it fully.
He's asking, what do you think it's coming for Latin America in the process of transformation, knowing the actual situation with COVID-19?
Yeah. Well, I think this globally is the worst economic crisis that we've had in hundreds of years. You may have seen last week, the Bank of England said this is the worst recession in 300 years. And I think for companies like Costa Rica and many others, it's going to be a very, very challenging time. But there are industries that are growing. For example, you're going to have a significant reduction in tourism into Costa Rica for many, many years. So any company that works in the tourism industry is going to have a long, what we call business winter. But at the same time, there are going to be areas, maybe within technology, that are going to be on the rise. So you need to find what are the growth industries that are applicable now and focus on those.
And how digital transformation fit within a transformational process?
So transformational process is basically the roadmap the company will be going through, and for most companies it would fit really well. And I've seen some wonderful examples where companies in Asia, where they basically look at the framework and they see it fits almost perfectly. So generally it fits really well.
Okay, I think we don't have more. Okay, yes, we have one. Are board of directors aware of the need of change?
Again, a really big question, and that is a question that we work a lot on in our online programs, because the board director plays a significant role. But at the same time, they don't always have to be a part of it. But I think one of the biggest bottlenecks, one of the biggest hurdles that we see is actually the role of the board of directors. So generally, the board is not always as relevant and as useful as they should be.
And we have another one. Do companies really have 10 years to transform when core business is hurting?
So if you go back to this idea of the shock, shift, and evolution. So if your core business is really hurting, like down 25, 30, 40, 50%, you're in a shock stage. And here you maybe have 6 months, you maybe have 12 months, you maybe have 18 months, or you're out of business. So your runway is extremely short. So for a lot of companies today with COVID-19, they have a very short runway and they need to act accordingly. For companies that are in the shift, they may have typically around 3 to 4 years. And in evolution, that's really when you need the sort of the 7 to 12 or often the 10-year timeline.
So if a company it's like just thinking about transformation, when would you recommend it's the best time to transform?
As soon as possible. And very often that means that you need to reassess this frequently, at least every 6 months, every 6 months. And if you wait until the data is ready, and if you wait until the proof is on the table, it's probably going to be too late.
And we have a question from the audience. Carla Zúñiga is asking, how can I know if my company can start a transformation process?
So I would actually take a look at the Why Transform canvas. You'll find it online. You'll find it on YouTube. And the Why Transform canvas has 6 questions, and you answer those questions, and it comes out with the survey score that tells you whether very urgent, medium urgent, and not important at all. And then following that, I would look at what we call the Transformation Starters Kit. And there we have identified 9 building blocks. And out of those, we very quickly realize when, who, and how should a transformation be played out. And all of this is in the online programs that we're working with.
Okay. And what are the keys to develop a successful corporate venture capital program?
Yeah, that is a very common question. So the simple key is there has to be a strategic purpose, and there has to be the right people and talent. So if you have a strong strategic purpose, why do you need this? Why is it important? And you hire the best people, you hire the people with the right skills. That's the keys.
Okay. So I think we are, well, we have another question. So time, it doesn't matter. Eduardo Madrigal is asking where he can find the material about this topic.
Yeah, so he can go to I don't know if I type it in just here, and so he can go to and both those pages will point to both the report and some of the tools and materials and webinars and online learning programs, and of course talk to Roberto or Carlos in Costa Rica.
Okay. Entonces, Eduardo, puedes visitar los sitios web que estás viendo en la pantalla y también puedes visitar el stand de ellos donde podrás encontrar más información y también ponerte en contacto. So now we are close with the conference. Thank you very much for your time. A todos les agradecemos habernos acompañado en esta conferencia. Les recordamos que nosotros continuamos con las conferencias. Tenemos 3 salones disponibles. Pueden consultar la agenda en el área principal. La pueden consultar por cada una de las charlas. Y no se desconecten porque nosotros acá en la sala 3 vamos a continuar con más conferencias.